Welcome to the latest episode of L.I.F.S, recorded live in conjunction with EuropeActive Health and Fitness Forum in Cologne. My co-host Mo Iqbal, founder and CEO of Sweatworks, and I are joined by some of the industry's most respected and influential experts and investors to talk about the latest fitness industry trends and research shaping the future of the sector. On this episode, we speak to Karsten Hollasch, global private equity leader at Deloitte, Herman Rutgers, ambassador for EuropeActive, Mullane, founder and CEO of Keepme, and Eric Falardeau and Gerritsen, partners at McKinsey. A special thanks for EuropeActive team for pulling this together. And if you do get any value from this whatsoever, please help us to get this out to more people by leaving a review and sharing it with one other person. Please enjoy this week's episode of L.I.F.S. Welcome, Karsten Hollasch, global private equity leader, financial advisory, and Herman Rutgers, ambassador for EuropeActive.
Correct.
How are you guys doing?
I think it was a fantastic morning. I think we got off to a good start. Didn't have time to have lunch, so I'll have to do that after this. And
you didn't miss anything, by the way.
No, it wasn't that great. Well, you know, I need to lose weight anyhow, so that's okay.
It was a very interesting presentation, and a number of things that struck me. I think the first one, if we start there, is everyone's got questions around: have people come back to the gym? Are they still working out at home? What's going on outdoors? Give us a little bit of an overview of the information that you've got regarding the trends regarding people's activities, and then also how you collected the data for this year's report.
Shall I cover that one? To answer your last question, we did 11,000 interviews in 19 European countries. And we did the same number of interviews the year before and 2022. So 2022, 2023, and January, always in January. So it's very recent data. And the makeup of the sample every year has been the same: male split, income groups, demographics, all comparable. So it's very good comparable data and in large samples, statistically significant sample. Then your first part of the question, what is the trends? The trend is really that we saw a huge take-up in home fitness during the Corona years. You know, in Europe, many European countries were up to 12 months in a year. They were closed 6 months of the year in those two Corona years. And we've seen in 22 a very strong comeback of the clubs, and a further strong comeback of the clubs, fitness in the clubs in 24. We see a downward trend on the home fitness and a sort of stable, a little bit declining, but relatively stable outdoor. So those are the three categories we cover in the research, and we ask the question to the consumers: where do you do your fitness activity, in the club, outdoor, or at home? And what we see is that the largest increase is in the fitness club, but the hybrid, the people who are doing both outdoor and fitness club, or are doing home and fitness club, or outdoor and fitness club, is increasing. So the group that is doing multiple activities, and that is, I think, the very important message to also the club owners, to tailor your offerings around all three of those elements. And I think that is we thought the hybrid would be there for a short time, but I think it's improving, and the knowledge of the consumers is getting better, so they know where they can train and how they can train. So I think that is a big takeaway for everybody in the industry.
And when you mention outdoor, that's not necessarily working outdoors in a club. That could be like in a park.
Jogging, could be walking, could be hiking, could be cycling, could be anything. Not necessarily fitness in the sense of lifting weights or doing cardio, but outdoor, meaning you do it outdoor mostly without equipment other than a bike to do the bicycling, or maybe Nordic walking sticks when you do Nordic walking, but it's not really, you would call it physical activity rather than maybe fitness.
Yeah, I think the term hybrid is almost overused at this point. It's really meeting the consumer where they are. If they're wanting to engage in fitness outside, then you meet them outside. So the question I have, and based off your research, thinking that clearly club operators are back. In most markets, they've exceeded now pre-COVID levels, both in units, in revenue, and in memberships. and you want to meet the consumer where they are, what type of role, if any, do you think those club operators should play in this, quote unquote hybrid world where they are engaging in at home and outside?
I think they made their learnings during Corona when there was no choice to open the club. So they needed to present something to their members, which was mainly in the virtual world. So they recorded YouTube videos, they set up apps, etc., etc. They were also quite innovative and organized outdoor classes, as you questioned that. So I think people got used to that and appreciate that. And I think the basic reason for success for operators to maintain that will really be important to have this, let's say, broader offering. Whereas, and that's what we've seen in the research, people would like to train out in a club. Yeah, so they were really eager to return to the club. So to socialize, to get motivation, train with others, to really get the professional equipment at home, etc., etc. So, but that being augmented by virtual classes or by some workouts at home, I think that's really the prerequisite of being successful in the future.
Now, your data and research is primarily based out of, is for Europe, but is primarily based out of 3 markets, as you talked about during your session: Germany, Spain, and the UK. Just give the audience some understanding into what made you focus on those markets and what could help maybe incorporate some other countries into the research.
We have focused on these 3 countries because those 3 countries are the biggest ones out of Europe, but we have gathered a lot of information also from the other countries. While we are focused on these countries, I do see that other countries, depending also on their maturity, etc., do operate more or less under the same regime. But the reason why we have shown just these 3 countries were that they're the biggest ones. Yeah.
And also there we have historical comparable data, best ones. And I think we're improving the data collection in all countries as we speak. As we said in the presentation, the European Data Hub is a new development where we're gathering data on a quarterly basis. In the European Data Hub, which will be presented this afternoon, we now have 16 million members in that database, and we get information on a quarterly basis. So those operators who provide data into the European Data Hub get on a quarterly basis information on the market developments, number of members, club openings, revenues, average membership prices. But you need to be part of that European Data Hub in order to get access to the data. That will not be published by us because that's private information. And if I supply data from my organization, I can calculate based on the total sample. I get only information from the total sample, and then I know what I gave in, and I can calculate my own market share development. So that's a new development.
You assume that the pandemic has created a lot of interest in health, fitness, and wellness because of what's been on the media and the raising awareness of that. What have you seen in terms of people, the market penetration during, sort of before, during, and after that period, and any insights into how people are using clubs almost as a result from that period onwards?
Yeah, I think when you look at the market pre-COVID and during COVID and then post-COVID, I think there's a continuation of the trend that when you have more offer to potential consumers, the demand is still there. So it's not a shortage in demand, it's a shortage in the offerings. So obviously when there was no offerings because of the club closures, people try to mitigate that by doing virtual or outdoor sports. And that's why obviously, for example, the cycling industry, I mean, they benefited a lot from Corona because everybody bought a bike and went outside, etc. But that's now over. So they have the new reality, but they have taken some, let's say, learnings from the Corona side and want to maintain that. And that's I mean, still the offering is there. And where offering is created newly, you will see the demand. So that's been, let's say, just evidenced by the numbers that you have an increasing trend, that there is no market saturation. So there's still some way to go to attract new members. And if you look at the average penetration rate of Europe with 8.4%, you wonder what the other 92% are doing.
Yeah, I had some questions around that because so the US, as a frame of reference from your research, is 21.8% compared to Europe at 8.4%. Herman, during the session, you said a really interesting point, which I found at least interesting for me, which is that a lot of the penetration is driven by two key factors. One is, as the number of locations increase and the club is closer to you, you're going to tend to use it, which we've seen in the US. And the second one, which I think, Karsten, you brought up, is the impact of VAT. And you had a really interesting slide up that kind of talked about the growth of penetration overlaid with the reduction in VAT. Talk a bit about those two kind of levers and why you think they're important.
Shall I cover the penetration and the clubs, and you can do the VAT? I think we've seen in, it's not in the report, but I've done some separate analysis on number of clubs and the penetration, that more supply creates more demand. If I don't have to drive 10 kilometers to go to the next club, I will be less likely to go to that club than if I can bike there or walk to my club. So there is a clear correlation between number of clubs and the variety of clubs in a particular region and the penetration rate. And I see that in many countries. If you take, for instance, a country like the Netherlands, a country with only 18 million people, there are 3,000 clubs. And a club defined, it could be an EMS studio, it could be a personal training studio, and it could be a David Lloyd with swimming pool and a lot of frills around it. So it's a matter of, well, how do you define our sector? That's the other thing on the ecosystem, where we've seen the expansion of the ecosystem in terms of how do we define fitness. But back to the number of clubs, I can send you that information, but it's really very interesting. Number of clubs and penetration. Norway, with a very high penetration, they have a very high pro capita number of fitness clubs in that country. Same goes for Sweden, by the way.
Yeah, and with respect to the VAT, I would say the VAT directly is not 100% influencing the correlation, but the VAT and appreciation of a lower VAT rate in a respective country towards certain service offerings, being it fitness, is something how a society looks at fitness being part of well-being, health. So I think that's the reason when you have, let's say, an appreciating society for fitness and you have people who tend to work out, the result is that they would say, okay, this is good for our society, so we as a government promote that by a lower VAT. So you can ask for the chicken and the egg, but I think it's overall that the society appreciates this as being part of your life, being part of your lifestyle to become healthier. And then the government is saying, okay, in addition, we reduce the VAT and encourage more people to train out. So I think that's like with books, in Germany, books are reduced because if you are a reader, you tend to be intelligent, etc., etc. So that's some incentives the government provide for that.
What about when you've got penetration, you've got then you've got saturation. When you're looking at these studies, how do you factor in the different market segments within that? So, like, do you tend to see in some of the emerging markets, the market starts with more low cost? Does it start with more premium? Does the low cost come in when, does the low cost come in when, the premiums start and then the low cost come and increase in market? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen that kind of tells more of a story around the segmentation from a price point perspective?
I mean, there are many elements to it. I mean, first of all, I did a market study many years back for a discount retailer in food. And they were asking, well, what are the entrance barriers to get into a new country? And one is obviously, are people ready to move into discount? Or do they appreciate really to have this mid to upper level of food in their country? So there needs to be somebody who is opening up this concept to the community first. So I call it the Aldi or the Lidl concept. And if they are there, it's easy because other brands would have it easier than to communicate what their offering is. I would not say generally you can say it's a discounter or it's a premium club operator to open a market, whereas a discount operator with less offerings, with smaller square meters of clubs, etc., generally it's probably quicker to leverage and to expand than if you take a premium operator with swimming pools, extensive sauna, etc., which is then a big location, a lot of capex, and then the proper location analysis you need to do, while a discounter can roll out much quicker, like Basic Fit. I mean, last year they rolled out 200 clubs plus, right? So, I mean, the concept is easier to roll out, per se.
I'll answer the question. Of course, I agree with Karsten, but I think if you look at I've been only 30 years in this industry, and I've seen in the beginning it's high end. In any country, it's the high end that starts. Fitness is for the elite. Fitness is for people who can afford, paying €100 or $100 a month. Then you see when that service is being more broadly accepted, you see the mid-market coming in, and I think the only when did budget clubs start at the high value low price? I like that name better. High value low price started with McFit in Germany, basically, which is 20 years ago. So from that point of view, I think you see an evolution, and it's a sort of a democratizing, making more democratic fitness by lowering the price, because then the barrier of entry. And the slogan of Basic Fit is making fitness affordable for everyone. Yeah, and you can, for €20 a month, what's that? The cost of 3 Starbucks lattes. That is what you pay for a whole month of having unlimited access to a fitness club, where you have all the machines you can ever dream of at your disposal. So it's actually, we're almost in the rental model. If I want to have the variety of fitness in my home, I need to have a treadmill, I need to have a cross trainer, I need to have a bike, I need to have weights, I need a weight stack, all of it. Impossible to do that. For that you would need to spend $100,000 probably in order to get that in your home fitness setting. I can go for €20 a month. We say budget is up to €30 in our definition for the market report. 30, then 30 to 50 is mid-market, and 50 and over is the premium market. But that is, we have a pretty good handle in Germany on how the split is between mid-market, high-end and low-end. And the growth is mostly in the high-end and in the low-end. The middle is a little bit more difficult to see growth.
But you will find that in many sectors. Yeah. So in fashion, you would see who is successful. It's really at the lower end of the market and really at the luxury end of the market. Where you are in the mid-market, you're going to be caught in the middle. So what's your differentiation towards the lower and to obviously the premium then? So I think that's how it works, and that's how people appreciate a clear communication around the brand and what you can get, right? And just to add to what Herman said, I think what we see now more and more, and also shown by the slides, price increases were not only done because of energy price increase, personal cost increase, etc. It's also about increasing quality. Yeah, and obviously the fitness industry suffered a long time from not giving that to the bottom line, but now they're getting it back from the members, because the members appreciate a higher quality and are ready to pay for this quality. Yeah.
And it's just kind of going back into bring this all together. You look at a country like Romania, so much of what you said is really around how well the society and culture in that country adapts fitness as a core competency as part of the lifestyle. So a country like Romania actually increased their VAT, I believe, by 19%, one of the largest ones. And then so that, I think, speaks to their willingness to potentially invest not only in public infrastructure. Like I went for a run today and I saw some beautiful trails, biking trails, running trails here in Cologne, but also in how they view clubs. And I think if clubs are more accessible, if they are more accepted in society, you see that high end and the high value, low price. I want to wrap up with one final really interesting point, which you presented on, which is around digital tools and wearable usage. Digital tools, both of them stayed relatively consistent. Digital tools are going up, and I think this ties into this omni-channel or hybrid approach that clubs need to take. Digital tool penetration was around 56% on average. Wearables was around 39 to 40% on average, which I would have thought that more people would have used wearables to track what they're doing in fitness. Maybe you could expand a bit more around those 2 points.
No, I think I was surprised to see in the 24 numbers that we did the January research that wearables hadn't gone up more than it did. I think maybe what one should consider is that you buy an Apple Watch or you buy a Fitbit or a wearable, you spend €600 and that product probably serves you for the next 6 years. And the good news is that what you see with wearables, very cheap wearables, people use them and they throw them away after a short period of time. So maybe the same percentage, around 40%, is still pretty good. It's gone down. So people continue using either their smartwatch or their fitness tracker longer than we thought they would. So you can interpret in two ways this around 40%. It's negative because it hasn't grown up. You can also say it's positive because it's stay there, so people continue using the wearable. So that I don't have the full answer to that. We should have some more in-depth interviews with those people who are using it. I can only see that around me and the people that I meet and people in our industry, many people use a wearable for their day-to-day as well as for their fitness.
Well, I think it helps inform you of behavioral actions, and then also as we're a product technology company, but even as an operator, it helps inform them on how to better serve their members by getting data from the wearables. But it's a competency, it's a sophistication that maybe the market isn't there. But these numbers are very much in line with the US as well.
Yeah. And again, it's a trigger to think you stand up, measure your sleep. I think there's a whole bunch of things we can do in our industry to help people to sleep better, to stress relief, quit smoking, all of these things, the more holistic approach to what is fitness, what is wellness. If I would ask 100 people, what is your definition of wellness? I'd probably get 100 different answers. Or same with fitness. Fitness is, many people may think it's bodybuilding or it's weightlifting or it's doing something to improve the physique of your body. I think there's more and more trend towards the health element. I go to the fitness club because I want to be healthy. I don't want to get sick. And I think that is every cloud is a silver lining. Corona taught people that if you're fit, you're less likely to catch corona than when you're not fit and you're overweight. So I think, as we said in the final slide of our presentation, the 100 million members in Europe by 2030, is that still doable after having 2 years of down numbers in terms of number of members? We've caught up, we're now above the pre-corona level, and we need to grow 5.8% on an annual basis to get to the 100 million, which we formulated 6 years ago, that target. So I'm very optimistic we will get there.
And right now you're at, from the report,
68 million.
68 million.
Yeah, yeah, 68 to 100. If you do the math, it's 5.8. At least the Deloitte calculators tells me. I'm not a mathematician, but they told me it's 5.8%.
Herman, Karsten, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, welcome. Yeah, our pleasure.
Here, Mullane, Keepme. It's been a couple of years since we had a conversation, and after listening to your presentation today, it made me realize at the time I knew nothing about what you was talking about then, and since then ChatGPT came along, and I had the opportunity, even Mo helping me as well, to understand really what AI was and the impact, and it's pretty impressive. And what was even more impressive was you were about to do an amazing demonstration today, and as we went down on the elevator, you told me what you was going to do if the Wi-Fi would allow it. So why don't we just start there and tell us a little bit about your sort of closing final performance and what it should have done.
It feels as if I'm trying to suggest something that didn't come off really, but what I wanted to, for this audience in particular, was to help them to understand the potential for utilizing these type of products, the products which are available to them, not just to me, but to them as well. And the 10-minute challenge was very simple. I wanted to build a landing page which is GDPR compliant, that would track a name, email, and mobile. I then wanted to build an Apple Watch app that would track the intervals between sets in the gym. And then I wanted to pay homage to the business formation on the back of a napkin and utilize it for Ian's habit tracker app, and then to be able to build within 10 minutes those 3 applications without the necessity to write 1 line of code. And yeah, didn't come off because of the Wi-Fi today, but when it has come off previously, it's a previous event, they're well received, and it just gives people an actual understanding. Because does anybody in that room not think about building a mobile app at some stage? Well, we're starting to get to the stage where they can.
Yeah, and Ian, you said something else that's really interesting that we talk about a lot, which is about focusing on outcomes. A lot of times when people get excited by new technology, they run to the technology and then they look for the problem to solve. Right? I think it's really flipped. And then they're disappointed when they make all this investment, whether it is in a mobile app or an AI or Web3 or something else, and they don't get an ROI, but they never thought about the ROI before they went into it. So you talked about this quote, I'm quoting here, but move the customer to their desired outcome. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Well, in particular, I think when it comes to in the PT environment, I don't think many PTs have the capacity to understand whether they are having an impact beyond maybe their visual verification of someone standing in front of the mirror and going, I think I'm looking a little bit better. We are all carrying around on our wrists, whether it be our Apple Watches or our Whoops, more data than a sports scientist had available to them 5 years ago. And it's the utilization of that in conjunction with a large language model, as well as putting the variety in place that we can do by understanding what we could possibly do with the setup that we've got, that gives us an opportunity. Consistency is always going to be the major part of an outcome, right? If we do it consistently, we're going to get the outcome that we desire or move towards it. So if we can add the variety, and then we can make sure that we are progressively getting better by using a large language model to identify what we should be doing, then I think that's where outcomes will improve. For this sector to move its penetration needle in any shape or form, we have to improve outcomes as well.
And then I want to take something that you said at the end, which is that AI will be the catalyst in increasing penetration. A lot of times, I mean, just talking about trainers, when people hear about AI, and we actually had experience with this at a very large gym chain in the US, where they launched an AI coaching model and didn't tell the trainers. The trainers then found out, I'm not going to mention who the gym is, but the trainers then found out and thought immediately, is this going to replace me? But it's really, it's not that, it's the opposite. And you were spot on, because what you said is that it's one, going to help us access more people. This AI is going to help open up accessibility, which is then going to help open up growth. Yeah. We're going to have more clubs, more people are going to join. We're going to need more people. So speak a bit about AI and how it's really going to help increase employment and not reduce employment?
Well, I think there are a number of factors at the moment. I think GLP is also going to play quite heavily into that in conjunction with it. But I think what we're looking at the moment is that penetration hasn't moved. It never does. I virtually, with hilarity, look at the 15 to 15.1 and wonder how we get so accurate with this type of stuff. But regardless, right, if we look at those penetration, COVID wasn't the catalyst people thought it would be by any stretch of the imagination. I do think there is more momentum than prior to 2019 around the wellness health aspect of it. But if we can improve, why do people stop going to the gym? Right? Well, there'll be a number of reasons, but I think in many cases it's because they're not getting the personal ROI that they thought they would get. They're not receiving the progress. And progress comes from, progressively, consistently doing the actual task, but doing it at a level that is going to give you the potential to have those results. And I think it's going to be the detail that the AI is going to give. If I'm a PT looking after 50 customers in a month, how can I possibly give them the variety and the personalization that's necessary at scale to know that every time that Mo or Matt turns up at my gym, I know I'm moving them forward to the next stage of their outcome as a whole? And I think that's where AI is going to help. And then the other point was around accessibility. There is a very significant part of the marketplace which isn't serviced currently and should be serviced for all of the right reasons. And I think that the capability to bring medical diagnosis into a PT environment, or indeed a gym environment like I do with Zara, gives us the capacity to be able to have more access. And that in itself is going to mean that there's going to be larger penetration.
I couldn't help thinking, you were talking about the large action models and giving an example of what an iPhone looks like with all of these different apps. And you explained that it probably won't look like that in 18 months. When business owners or people that are thinking about developing, whether it's software or ideas for their business, how do you think about the progression? Because I can't help thinking that instead of having this sort of linear or organic growth, it's almost exponential, and you almost have to think totally different. Like Mo and I were working on a project together, and talking to him, the way I was trying to solve the problem was just so slow compared to how now I've started to look at it. So what advice? Because you must get into businesses when they're also thinking on to try and solve the problem at a certain level, and then you come in and you're almost having to sort of expand their mind from some extent. So what do you how do you get people to look at what you do in a slightly different way?
The first way I'd deal that scenario, if I had that, was I'd be speaking to him as well. So that's the first thing. But the second part is, I think that one of the biggest challenges we've got with AI adoption at the moment is that people have got so much vested in their existing technology stack, so much expertise, so much sunk capital, and they're not appreciating not only the step change that the technology will bring to their capability, but also the fact that these tools are democratizing the capability to use artificial intelligence at a speed that we haven't seen elsewhere. As you know, I come from a financial engineering background, so, and I was paid a great deal of money to be a quantitative engineer for a long, long time building predictive learning models. My capabilities now exist as one of the GPT-4 tools which anybody can utilize. The same stuff where we had hedge funds over 100 billion operating off that particular type of technology is now something that anybody can go onto ChatGPT-4, select that GPT and actually utilize it. So the democratization of technology means that for most organizations, they need to really throw out what they know from a technology perspective, and more to most point, to be frank. AI is a solution looking for a problem in many cases. And what we realistically need to understand is, what is it in an ideal situation that we would like to be able to do? Do we want to have a better understanding of what the business is going to be in the future? How we are looking at improving our customers' outcomes? What does that actually mean? How does that look like, right? What have we got available for resources within the business? What data have we got within the business as a whole? And then bringing those together, you've then got the ability to map it out. But what I think will happen, and you look at an organization like Gymnation, right? That is an organization that will grow at a speed far in excess of what would traditionally be expected for them with the capital available, because of the infrastructure skills that they've put in place to be able to grow faster with product personalization, more efficiency within the business. And that's going to change the landscape, I think, when it comes to the competitive side.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Also looking at AI as the next evolution of the user interface. You talked a lot about the user interface here. So even think about going back 20, 30 years. You're used to PCs and computers and computing power there. Then you had the mobile revolution. Our iPhones today are probably more powerful than our desktop computers of 10 years ago.
Definitely, yes.
Right, if not more. And I think the next interface, so the mobile interface, and when that happened, I remember because we just hit our 12th year in business. And we were founded in 2012, and at the time, very few gyms knew how to leverage mobile computing. It's how we built the business, right? We helped them take their and use this new interface. AI is now that next transformative technology. AI is the next interface. And I think you've got to learn and really think about how do you get there. Now, you made up a good point there in that your existing team may or may not be the right team to get you there. And even though you've made a lot of sunk costs, it's like saying, well, I spent all this money on mainframes. I spent all this money on desktops and expensive things. Well, you have to move past that and embrace the new technology, because if not, someone like a Gymnation is going to do it.
Yeah, and they are, and the cost. I mean, we referenced Moore's law around the processor cost in the past, but we are seeing that as well. I can train a large language model for a couple of $1,000s now. That was literally in the millions over 12 months ago, right? So we are going to get to the stage where all of us are going to have our own individual large language models, which has got the capabilities that we're looking to do, which may be our fitness, our lifestyle, our family, or other aspects of it, which we're going to be able to train. And we've moved from the stage where you needed someone like myself or one of the data scientists to work with, to now dragging and dropping the literature that you actually want to work with, and for that large language model to be trained. I think there is no necessity to understand one line of code to be able to program a large language model for most of the everyday tasks that you would want to do as an operator.
Is that not a challenge though for people? I can imagine, like I've forced myself to learn a lot about this, and I don't know hardly anything, but I know way more than a lot of my friends know about it. And I guess there's people that are running companies that have made those big investments, got big teams. How are you speaking to them? Because in some cases it's almost like, well, you kind of you need to just get over that as quickly as possible and move to another way. Like, what conversations are you having to people, and what advice could you give to people so that, because as you said, it costs hundreds of millions to do some of these things, which is now almost next to nothing. So what do you say in that situation?
It's for me, it's picking your battles, because unfortunately I hammer on an awful lot of closed doors because there is just no reasoning with the state of play in some organizations. They won't. And we will look back in 10 years' time, Harvard will do a business study and they will look at the detrimental effect of not doing it. You know, it's incredibly similar to exactly what happened in 97, 98, 99 when we went through Web 1.0, right? We're at a stage at the moment where those that adapt, those that adopt will come out stronger. Those that don't will probably become irrelevant. And we could all, you know, whether it be in the media companies or anything else, we could list the organizations in Web 1.0 that got left behind. We will find this here. I think the pace of change on this is considerably faster than the pace of change that we saw in 99, 2000, 2001 around the web as well, because it's not actually an arms race relative to capital deployment here. It's about adoption of the tools because they are there and they're available.
I would also add that the impact and the potential of impact for health outcomes and actually making people healthier is greater than ever. And that's why I don't always understand or recognize why more people aren't really embracing and learning more about this, because you had the opportunity to truly impact millions of lives in a way that we weren't able to be done before. Look, we're at a European Congress here. Ian, what do you think about just compliance, privacy, governance around AI? We get asked about that a lot, as I'm sure you do. A lot of concerns around that. What role should government or associations, like EuropeActive, what role do you think they should play in that?
An educator's role, because in Europe you've got some of the most stringent data laws possible with GDPR and the rest of the stuff, but in the same time we've also got a marketplace which is openly putting its data into Google and putting it into ChatGPT without a worry in the world. It's always a value exchange. I will provide my data for a level of value, and it's a case of, in the case of an operator, explaining what value that will get if I do provide them my bio data for my wearable. I think when it comes to an association like EuropeActive, they've got the possibility of training people to understand that there is a difference between personal data and synthetic data. So synthetic data is where we take data which has the same behavior as personal data, but we anonymize it so that we've got the capability to still build the model without any personal data being exchanged with the model. And I won't go through it here, but there's at least 3 or 4 other methodologies that can be utilized. So when I hear it, I generally ask a few questions, and I normally find it's a smokescreen that somebody's put up for either a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness and motivation to engage on the topic.
Well, I think that's a really good point. A lot of people bring up, I do want to unpack the one thing around synthetic data, because I think it's important for the audience to know that, and you and I have spoken about that, but essentially it is, where you're taking out any PII or personally identifying information out of what you're using to train the model. When you train the model itself gets smarter, you become the benefactor of that. So it's a transaction, right? You provide some data, but I'm not losing, you don't know who I am, but you're gonna make the thing that I'm using smarter and better. It's a little bit different than modern day Web 2 technologies, which is ad driven. You're trading your data and you're served up ads, and in some cases relevant, in some cases not ads. This to me, I think, is more beneficial.
Correct. I mean, there should be a very clear value proposition for me trading that data, and quite frankly, when it does come to the personal data, there's not a necessity. You can still anonymize that quite quickly on that side of things. So I think there's an education role that EuropeActive can play here, which is helping the operators understand the different types of data or the implications of looking at these technologies relative to the data. Because one of the biggest assets organizations have in this space is their data. And what I have been pleased to see is that from 5 years ago to present day, they do seem to be, even though they're not exercising or utilizing it as well as I would like them to do, they're collating it and collecting it an awful lot better. And in some ways, it's because GDPR has forced them to do that. So that means they've got this data resource. It's now a case of how can they utilize it within the limitations.
I've got one final question. Do you think it's easier for companies that are just starting in the last few years to adopt this and build this into the businesses than older ones? And if that is the case, are there ways where you could almost like set up a division that runs slightly differently and then gradually moat it over to to a new way of doing business?
It's definitely easier if you do not have the infrastructure in place that's been dominant over the last 10 to 15 years or so, without a doubt. And I think, again, not wanting to reference Gymnation too much, but they've been founded since 2018. So they've not got that infrastructure of historical that they're trying to move out, any of those old club management systems or anything else along those lines. I never suggest to any organization in any terms to do anything half-assed in the first place, because quite frankly, setting up that type of aspect of it generally means that the minute the going gets tough, that will be the bit that gets cut away anyway. This is no longer a case of whether you need to go all in or not. I'm obviously going to say, but I honestly believe there is a necessity for all in. Not all in adoption, as in throw out absolutely everything, but understand what is available and understand whether you would extract value by implementing that. And that means that you can look at acquisition of members or retention of members or content generation or PT optimization, and then you can bring in segments of that, so eventually you're moving it across the piece. I'm not suggesting do it all at once, because quite frankly that can be too much for most businesses.
Ian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are joined today by two partners from McKinsey, Eric Falardeau and Gerritsen. Eric, you're from Montreal, you're a partner in McKinsey, and Hop, you're from Amsterdam. Thank you for coming on. You just came off your session, which was extended because the Q&A kept on going on. So we've been sitting here patiently waiting for you, kind of talking about what we're going to be asking. Must have been a great session. So let's dive into it. You're here at FIBO, at the EuropeActive Congress that precedes FIBO, and they asked you to talk about two topics that you brought together, digital and AI and sustainability. First question I have, and this could be to either one of you, is how do you bring those two pieces together?
Difficult, but if there's one sector of activity where it actually makes sense, it's fitness and wellness. We started by a little bit painting the picture that we see together, which is a fantastic industry that has grown because of the importance to people and the passion and innovation of the group. But there's always been two clear challenges on the industry, which is human and discipline. How do you motivate people to adopt the habits, and the perception that this reserved to a more niche folks that are focused on their appearance or whatever. And the reason why we think both of these topics were incredibly interesting to hit together is each of them hit on those two Achilles heel. So we think the moment that is in front of every professional in that room and in front of this sector as a collective is extremely unique. So we're happy to talk about both.
No, I think that's really relevant. When you look at market penetration rates, I don't know if you saw the first session this morning or not, but in some countries were as low as 6%. The US in the high end is about 21.8% penetration. And we keep on going after, as an industry, that same market. What we have been really challenged by has been going after the newer market, the people that aren't already members, the people that have not already embraced the lifestyle. And I truly believe it's because when you think about what we do, getting people to want to work out and eat better, it's not what our mind is conditioned to do. We're conditioned to sit in front of a couch and watch Netflix. We're conditioned to go after comfort foods and not move. That is how we are designed to do. So I always challenge our industry to say that, look, what we're trying to do is a very hard thing. So don't look at what happens in Netflix sometimes, because Netflix's job is relatively easy. Yes, they're using AI to personalize and do all things, but you are attracted to that from a physiological perspective. You do not want to put the work in to get harder. So I think I can really relate to that. Going into digital and AI, there are going to be immense applications for that. And I truly believe it is the transformative engine, the largest that we've seen since mobile computing, right, in coming into the sector. What are some of the more immediate, if you were to break it up into near, mid, and long-term applications that you think this industry can recognize?
You want to take that, Job?
Yeah, we discussed there in the plenary also a few applications that I think are for now. We brought 3 today, and that doesn't mean that it's only these 3, because actually the amount of use cases, that's what we also brought, are across the entirety of the business. So whether it's member acquisition, whether it's member LTV, or it's supply chain in the equipment industry, digital and AI is everywhere, in every function. We brought 3 use cases that we find of particular interest now. One of them is relatively, I call it classical AI, and it's churn prevention, churn prediction and churn prevention. And it's a theme that is extremely relevant for this industry. And with the increase in quality of the algorithms, plus the compute power that is right now, it's actually nowadays possible to assess and analyze tens of millions of combinations of factors, and by that actually see when people might churn and do preventative actions to make sure that they stay with you. So that was one topic that we brought, and we actually received a lot of questions about it. And it's one of the topics that we truly believe in. The second topic and the third topic were more of generative AI of nature. So they are for today. We believe they are for today, but they are also a little bit more experimental still. One is about the co-pilot. The co-pilot, we brought an example of a chatbot that moved from rule-based engine to an actual generative AI type of chatbot application that talks with humans in humane language. And we also provided the bridge to that can also be your gym co-pilot. So if you in your gym know what to do, you can say how you feel today, and rather than being bored and do the same thing all over again, you actually get a humane-based or human-based advice on how to navigate the gym and make optimal use of it. So that was another one that we brought, and that co-pilot concept can also be brought to the gym operator or the employee that's there to actually trigger the right actions to, again, stimulate the members to do the right things with their precious time. The third topic that we brought was automated content generation. So we see with images, videos, text, we see that generative AI is increasing the productivity of content generation so much that we actually believe that in the marketing funnel, so which message do I bring to whom, at which moment in time, at which channel, to make sure that I actually get my customer acquisition cost to a relatively good level. We believe that productivity of the people that work in it and the effectiveness of it can actually increase. We can at least see effectiveness numbers that double. So that automated content generation, Gen AI enabled, is a theme that we also brought and we thought would be, we hope to see next year in the campaigns of January fitness members.
And what about sustainability? Like, what was there? We didn't get to see the presentation, but was there any examples that you gave on that side? And if so, could you share those?
Yeah, so we started by having a bigger discussion on the societal impact of the sector, because one, we think the sector has the right to lean in a lot more than it does today and proudly on what it already does. If you think about the potential to improve quality of life throughout somebody's livelihood, and we shared some of the quantification of it from our McKinsey Health Institute, it's amazing. The people in the room today, this whole sector is focused on all of the preventive side of that, which in our assessment is could be reducing the disease burden in the next 10 years by about 40% with what exists today. So we started by talking about that. Our hope was for the whole group to lean in more into the narrative, the measuring, the talking about what they're trying to improve, what they're doing, and so on. There's an imperative in front of our generation which we can't ignore, which is perhaps not the logical sector to start with, if you think about where carbon comes from globally, but it is the environment. And there we leaned in a little bit on tactical examples. And we shared we like to think about it as where is the carbon and what's the carbon abatement cost curve? Like, what is the economic impact of abating each unit of carbon? And there's a very nice example which we see in every model that has stores, whether it's retailers, whether it's hotels, whatever, which is the benefits from reducing the energy that we consume. This is particularly relevant for this group in Europe, which have seen quite a bit of inflation in energy costs in the past few years. So we've given that as one example, time constrained, of course, but we think that the sector has a few tactical opportunities to improve both profitability and carbon and play its role in this joint challenge.
And actually in the building space, we're getting to a bit of an inflection point right now with regulation, but also variability of energy prices and the security that actually building owners want to have, plus the technology advancements of heat pumps, batteries, solar panels, plus the way to digitally engage the building owner, that it actually makes for a more than 10% investment to now decarbonize your building entirely. So it is now not just a thing you do for the environment, but right now it starts to become a real financial benefit for you as a business to run a shop or a location that's decarbonized entirely.
Yeah, because this morning we were listening to some numbers from Deloitte, and they were basically saying that, I can't remember the exact slide, but they were saying that it's important, for, when they surveyed gym owners, it was important, but only, when price came into it as a factor, it was, only 50% took it seriously. So I guess, are there any, you've given one example, are there any other examples where moving over to this way, to decarbonize actually makes, improves the bottom line, and it's very clear to sort of see how you get from one, A to B, for example?
Yeah, like to me, I can think of three, right? One, I think, is the clearest. A lot of these models require operating locations. A big part of the facility cost is actually the energy required. So I think that's one. Yep was alluding to it. I think when you take a look at managing a supply chain for fitness equipment companies and so on, that I think is a more clear and seen case across different analogs, which I think they would know as well. So that's kind of in number two. Number three, which is more far-fetched, but we do have a few ideas for whoever would want to talk to us, is leaning in on green business building has actually been an interesting lever for some people that say, I want to play my part in this. I actually think some of the biggest impact I could have is actually building a new business, which is analogous and consistent enough with the strengths that I have and the advantages that I have and what I bring to the table, but opens up an avenue that I don't actually have today in order to play my part in decarbonizing our sector. So we have a few very specific, in particular for equipment companies, if they wanted to chat, like these are never the most straightforward, but there's some very nice examples out there.
Well, I think in looking at strength, Nike released a new line of strength equipment last year, and the plates were made out of recycled shoes. I think we
make recycled plates as well. Did you?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
do you do that?
No,
there you go. Okay, no, so Escape Fitness and Nike do recycle. But I think that's one way to do it. But I think there's also a very strong secondary market for cardio equipment as well, and that I've noticed some gyms in secondary markets tend to reuse and really being able to repurpose that, because there's a good ecosystem around phones, right? Phones get recycled and repurposed in a very big way.
It's this is absolutely nothing to do with fitness, but we actually helped. We helped a client actually in the hardware, like technological hardware, computers and all that, create a business that did exactly that just a few years ago. Whole new business opportunity for them, but also playing an outsized part in the impact that they are having on circularity within that sector and reduction of net total carbon.
So it's good for a business to be kind of, to be thinking about that. Do you think the consumer, because we've seen, and it might have been a McKinsey report about a month ago, around consumer preferences, consumer buying preferences have actually shifted since post-pandemic, right? Where I think pre-pandemic sustainability was actually one of the top things that people would look for from a brand. Post-pandemic, that has changed. And in fact, influencer marketing and whether the influencer that they follow does it or not, almost takes precedence to sustainability, among other factors like price and other things. Do you see, how important do you think consumers value that today?
And to me personally, it's a bit unfortunate, but what you said is true. It's actually not the pandemic that caused the shift, but it's the economic climate. And we unfortunately see people moving back to a preference. They're down trading also in their groceries. And environmental consciousness of what people buy and therefore choosing a different product. Even the health component is the same thing. So people want to eat more healthy if you ask them to, but what they actually buy and whether they want to pay more for it. Yeah. Unfortunately, we currently see not the behavior that we indeed saw in a bit during the pandemic.
Even in clothing, if you look at like Shein as an example, is it perfect one of a clothing apparel company? They're meant to be, one, it's even how they're produced, the materials they use is not environmentally friendly, but then they're meant to be used a couple of times, then you throw it away, right?
Yeah.
Instead of buying a high quality.
But I would like to provide a nuance. I completely agree with what Joop was saying. The question that most people ask themselves is like, well, does the environment matter to the consumer? And then they answer no, but I'm not sure that the answer is no. There are other things that matter.
That matter
That's
more.
the fact. Exactly.
And
but that
and
really
right now
matters.
it's more the affordability.
Exactly.
That's a higher purpose or higher need right now in the hierarchy than our environment.
And that matters a lot, right? Because despite that, so we are a small mammal that grew up in a world of large mammals. So it makes sense that there's a lot of different things that make us think about what else matters. And those are shaped by context, shaped by insecurities, whatever. But it doesn't change that for the majority of people that matters. And if you can find a way to help me partake and be a part of the answer, that matters. And the reason why I say that is I think it would be foolish for somebody not to be asking themselves in their category, what is it that my consumer is looking for and how do I deliver it? But I also think you can add the question of where and how can I actually play my part? Where and how can I actually introduce innovation? Where and how can I actually increase the understanding of it? So both go together, but yes, of course, we need to start by what drives the decision. Can we make sure we're delivering on this? Because it would be foolish to ignore that.
I think in this sector, you talked about the manufacturers. I think a lot of this is being able to provide some examples of the business opportunity, because clearly price is always going to be a factor, whether you're an operator or a manufacturer. But when there's an exciting business opportunity or a way to think about it or a way to do things, then suddenly you've got a lot of people's attention because it's like, okay, this is a great opportunity. How are you, or is there any ways where you're providing ideas and examples for people in either camp to say, look, this is a new business opportunity in this sustainable? Because I think really that's got to be, not that people don't care about the sustainability story, but I think that's going to get a lot more people listening and innovating and investing in some of those ideas.
So you already alluded to what we call green business building. It's one of the things we do that's currently in one of our growth engines, one of the highest growth pieces that we do. You asked, are you also providing the ideas? And yes, we do. There's many different ideas that you can do. But with business building, it's typically not the idea that matters most. It's the execution and the pivoting and the changing and the testing and the learning and finding the product market fit before you go and scale it. The ideas typically, at least that's my experience, we come with ideas also to our clients, but typically they have much better ideas because they operate their business. They see their customers and their suppliers on a day-by-day basis. So typically then we come with an idea and then they say, hey, that's funny, I thought of something similar, namely XYZ. And then we start to say, okay, but let's size it. How big can this be? What if so many people start using it? And what if we have a commission model or a changing business model that you currently do not do? Does that provide indeed a business opportunity? And then we say, okay, let's try it. And then it's all around execution, trial and learn.
What is McKinsey's interest in this? Like, you've obviously presented the reports. You've got a health institute. Like, how do you guys monetize these ideas, these
well,
concepts?
There's a few different lenses, and I'll ground also on the topics we're asked to talk about today. So, both when it comes to improving health globally and decarbonizing, like we have the ambition to be the single biggest catalyzer for decarbonization in the private sector globally. So to engage in the discussions where people are open to have it, to figure out what role we can play, we play the long game on that. So that I would say is number one. This is an arena that we have to be a part of and understand how we can influence. From a more direct, more selfish standpoint, there's more than one opportunity where we have found the ability to create impact with a client on levers of importance, whether it's how do I actually design memberships and pricing, whether it's how do I embark on this digitization journey and create value and gain confidence that I can do it. So indirectly through this, we find opportunities. But when we come to an event like this and when we engage with the sector, most of the companies much smaller, et cetera, to us, we think like, hey, what is our role in this arena, period? And so far, opportunities have come out of that.
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunities really coming out of these both categories. And looking at emerging markets as an example, as a society matures, typically we consume more energy. Energy is one of the biggest drivers when you improve your quality of life, right? We all come from a Western society. We consume individually more energy than someone who is in a developing or an emerging market. And when you're looking at those new markets, as you see fitness and wellness grow in emerging markets, even developed markets like India and China where it's growing, or even Eastern Europe, by combining digital, AI, and sustainability, I think you could really achieve scale more quickly than what we've done in the West in more mature markets. So I think the positioning of this presentation and your session is really spot on for anyone looking to go into either emerging markets or markets where there's lower penetration, where they're looking to expand their footprint as well. But I want to thank you for coming on. Really appreciate the session and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks for the opportunity as well.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Just before you go, I was curious. I'm a big coffee drinker, and I saw at the end of your slide there was this coffee example.
Yeah.
Give me the highlights of that story, just because I like to use these analogies.
We pulled this out at the end. We had too many things, but there's I see a link in between what coffee has done as a category in the last 15 to 20 years and what I think fitness can do. So let me give a few components of that. So number one, to evolve from a very rational source of energy or routine fulfillment to a third place in one of the most important moments of my day. The category as a whole have done what some of the leaders have leaned, Starbucks and whoever, have leaned into making that association become a reality. So I think fitness is actually in the midst of doing this, and I think they can do it a lot more. If Starbucks can be a third place, why on earth can't the gym be a third place?
I think it is. You do mention it here about Starbucks being the third place. We often talk about, with the return to office kind of having mixed results. I mean, each of our businesses, we've kind of struggled to bring people back into the office right now. And what we found, at least from our teams, is that the gym, in a lot of cases, has become the third place.
100%.
Or the second place, right?
That's kind of one component. I think there's a second component, which is like very fragmented industry structure to start. How does it evolve? And it's actually interesting for two reasons. One is there is room for leaders with ambition to lead the redefinition of what this category looks like to actually benefit and have room with that. But that does not come at the expense of the ability for different business models, smaller businesses to say, yeah, but there's room. That's not a winners take most. That's a may their winners take all. It's a may their leaders take most. And we recognize this, the same thing. And the third one, and I'll stop thereafter, is we think there is ability similar to in coffee of like, can I actually redefine the moment and the interaction, leveraging digital technology and information in order to completely transform my business reality and my ability to deliver an augmented experience to the consumer. I'd argue it's a lot less fertile ground to come up with these in a world of coffee, quick transaction, but I think companies like Starbucks and many others have done fantastic. We have a much more interesting set of opportunities here, and the leaders are setting the way. So that's why we wanted to end on that. We had too much content, we took it out in the end, but it's imperfect in so many ways, but I think there's interesting analogies in between. Such an important moment of the person's day, and how do we lean in?
Yeah, great.
We'll include that in there.
Yeah, that was. I saw it at the end, and I thought I'd just we'll use that. Well, thanks again. The sustainability thing is interesting because my dad actually set up a company where we take we make weight plates and dumbbells, and it's shipped from China. They use iron ore, which they dig out of the ground. It's a lot of heat created that. So now in England they're using end of life materials and molding them in a cold process, creating like these weight plates and things which are very similar priced, but they're about 90% recycled materials. Oh, cool. So, but the thing is, they're similar price, but they're a little bit more turned onto it in Europe. But in America, it's just people are like, it doesn't matter, you know, it's not a big deal. So that's why I'm wondering, like, you know, how for the fitness industry can take it more seriously. Because I suppose when you think about it, you know, if it's an unhealthy planet, we're living in that planet. So, you know, working out isn't going to make a difference if you're breathing in or living in a polluted fishbowl. But it just seems as though the operators are very slow, particularly if it costs any more money. They're very slow to sort of embrace those types of ideas.
Well, first of all, congrats.
Yeah,
I think this is very cool that you're doing this.
Same here.
I think it's tough, right? Like to me, and this is very much my own perspective, like I think about it as seduction. And the goal is, can I seduce the person to change a choice or to care about something? The reason why I go with seduction is, does the overall package allow me to have something that's exciting enough for people to talk about it or to choose? And when it is a single dimension, imagine, I often make, because I think seduction, I make the analogy to dating. Imagine the world's biggest asshole that you have no appetite to spend a second with, but that has the bow tie that you like or the dress that you like. It's not enough, right? So to me, it's like, how do we build from what we care about and what we build from, but create something that's exciting enough for people to say, hey, did you hear about this? And for them to, like, if there's not a rational component, if it's in the emotional definers, I'm really happy that my gym has that, then we got to figure out how does the package make sense together. And yes, there are nuances across markets about like what will resonate as a package of people say, I want to talk about this. I'm exciting enough to notice it rather than, yeah, actually, I don't really care what place my gym has as long as they're not broken.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which probably the starting point for most people.
Especially in the high value, low price kind of category, I think that's it. They're like, it's fine because I'm paying $10 a month. Right, but once you start going up to $100, $200, you know, having even when you walk in, having it smell a certain way, having that expectation, you expect it to be that. It's got, and then it makes you want to be there.
Yeah.
Right, it helps.
It's very, very cool that you're doing that. I had never known about that.
Right. Well,
very cool.
Yeah, it's a tough sell, but
yeah, I could see that. Very nice to meet you both.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for your time. It's great. Yeah, appreciate it.
Welcome, Utku Toprakseven, who is the Chief Product Officer of for Global. You just came out of a session here at EuropeActive, and you talked a lot about data and analytics, and we are going to be diving into that here.
Perfect. Very pleased to be here and be part of the podcast.
Well, your presentation was titled Accelerating Progress, Advancing Through the European Data Hub. That might be a great place to kick things off. Why don't you tell us about the European Data Hub and what that project is about?
Sure. So European Data Hub is a big digital transformation project that goes back to 2021 when we started working with EuropeActive in order to use data and insights to demonstrate the scale, value and impact of the European health and fitness market. Obviously, there has been market reports that's been published annually, but that was driven by self-reported data that's not dynamically updated. So our solution was, how do we use a digital ecosystem to collect this information on a more regular basis and generate insights to help operators to make better decisions, sector leaders to make better decisions that are driven by live and accurate data, but also to use this data to attract more investment into the industry, whether it is for business growth or innovation, and also linking this data with good research in order to evidence the impact of our industry in health and other social outcomes.
So there's two sides, investors and social health outcomes. If we look at those two individually, what would you say are some of the big and interesting trends that you're seeing in those two areas? You know, one from an investor's perspective and two from a social impact.
From an investor perspective, it's important for whether it is venture capital or any other investor looking into our industry to know, is this a growth sector? Is this a sector that's actually has recovered from COVID times, and is it growing financially, people-wise, club-wise? And in order to provide that, we need sector-wide data about, are we growing or are we staying still? If we are growing, are there certain countries which are growing faster than the other ones? Or is there certain type of fitness centers, whether it is low cost or premium, growing faster than the other ones? So in order to present a strong picture of our industry, we need to provide regular information to the financial markets about the positioning of our industry. Of course, when they dive deeper, you also go into things like attrition rates, retention rates. So is this a sector where you keep customers over a long period of time so you can actually engage other commercial activities linked to it? And how do you engage with those customers in their lives outside the facility as well? So these are the things we need regular information from the industry being provided to the stakeholders investing into our sector. That's on the more commercial side. If you look at the health side, for the last 10 years, our industry has been claiming we are not leisure sector, so it's not just somewhere people spend their leisure time on, but actually we are part of the health and wellness industry. However, to be able to evidence that, you need good research and data. So if you say we are keeping people healthier, the question is, okay, but how? However, if you combine good research, which is now in place through the works of academic institutions showing the relationship between how staying active actually decreases certain heart conditions like coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and many other diseases by a significant amount, then you can actually put a monetary value about the health savings you generate for a country. And that way, you can start having much more informed conversations with the health authorities and governments in order to divert investment to the preventative health and make our industry part of that sector as well.
Now, looking at big data, it's really effective when you have, the more data you have, the better. The more people that contribute, the better. You've got quite a bit of scale right now. You've got about 5,100 clubs, I think 141 operators, 15.3 million memberships. That's pretty large, but what percentage do you feel like you represent out of the total market in Europe today?
So if you look at the total market, we are talking about currently 65,000 clubs across Europe. But at the same time, obviously, our initial focus is to generate a sample where we can get good quality, high quality data in a regular basis. So in that sense, I would say currently the data is slightly skewed towards the international large operators who are primarily creating the bigger size of that 5,000 odd clubs. But especially in the UK, in the home country where we are placed, we also capture about 95% of the public sector operator data as well, which allows us to go into the smallest clubs with 1 to 3 sites operators too. So I would say in the UK, we are very representative. In the Europe, in terms of the large-scale operators, we are very representative. Where we want to grow next is to make sure we capture the independent market, the smaller operators, and also countries that don't have necessarily the big international players, but lots of local players as well.
How are you? How's it being funded? Sounds, because I know this morning Herman was talking about creating some of these reports and and the costs associated. So what are you doing?
So in the initial instance, in terms of the European data project, that's funded by the EuropeActive, and EuropeActive's President's Councils of Operators and Digital and Tech Suppliers through the membership fees they are providing. This is a EuropeActive project for the entire sector. However, when we go to the UK, where we have built on this initial step, we are going and working with the UK government. So some of the funding comes through the government sources, but also there are products we are generating using this data that's relevant for the operators in the sector, which they are paying a subscription and funding basically through their own use of the products as well. So at the top level, sector level, EuropeActive, Sport England, UKActive, government institutions fund the big data sector view, and then for the more detailed views, it's working with the operators and generating BI solutions for them is the funding source.
Now you also are able to measure social impact. You've got some really interesting stats here. You talk about, in every $1 that's invested in sports and physical fitness, it returns $4 of impact in social value. Yeah. I'd love to understand how you came up with that number, but also, if you had additional data, what you could do with it. So I constantly think about, what if we integrated with Apple Health? You pull in biometric data, biowearable data, and you track that over a period of 10 years. I think the data could be significant and how it could impact and change public policy and even operator policy and products and services. So just talk a bit about, the overall value of the data beyond just revenue and just some of the fundamental stuff.
100%. So this, first of all, this is not our model. This is not for global model. If you go back to 2014, the initial starting point for that was UK government commissioning Sheffield Hallam University, which is one of the top 2 institutions in the UK working in the sports sector, to do an analysis at the national level about return on investment in physical activity. And when they did their research using WHO guidelines and all of the evidence and literature review available, they have basically created a globally accepted evidence base in terms of the relationship between physical activity and in the outcome areas like physical and mental health, subjective well-being, individual development, and social development. In the physical and mental health specifically, this is linking the prevalence rates of certain conditions and the physically active people having a decreased rate of risk for those conditions, turning into prevented cases across the entire nation, and this translating into the total savings to the economy for the health spent in that country. Now, this model is globally accepted because the evidence base is global and WHO supported. However, of course, the difference is when you go from UK to Europe to US, your prevalence rates for different conditions are different, treatment costs are different, so there are adjustments made for each country. Now, this is very much a top-down model. So you take the national model, you take the big data we have in the system, and you are able to calculate basically those savings at an individual person level or at a local level for a city, etc., using this top-down model. Now, when we come to what you said earlier, if we get better data from the individuals, both health data and also the activity data from Apple Health or other sources, then you can start making more specific conclusions from the actual data, not from the research that's conducted in a lab or anywhere else which generates you the sector level insight, but actually you can start drilling down into much more direct relationships, correlations between active data coming from millions of devices. But I think this is exactly where the sector is moving into, like almost getting more granular data from health and physical activity, which allows you to do those more interesting correlations with the big data.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you collect this data. We spoke again to Herman earlier about some of the studies, and it must be quite difficult to collect data and ensure that what you're trying to find out, you're actually finding out through doing this type of research. So how are you conducting some of this? Is it person to person? Is it sending information out by email, surveys? How are you collecting that?
I mean, our main differentiation as for global is, since we started this journey for the last actually 12, 13 years, our approach has always been, we will do this through technology. So technology is the answer for that one. It's not manual data collection, it's not surveys. Of course, surveys has a part in this to get qualitative data, but business data needs to be a system-to-system integration. So we have created a big data infrastructure where we connect to 80 plus different technology systems, and we create integrations which allows us through APIs or through other automated ways to extract data from one system into our system. And then one of the biggest value add we provide there is the standardization of the data, because one of the big problems or challenges of our sector is the data is held in different systems in different ways. So unless you standardize it, even to the simple thing of you have data from 3 different systems or providers who provide swimming activity, you don't know what's swimming, because someone is calling it little ducklings, someone is calling it swimming with dolphins. If you want to say, okay, what's going on in swimming in this country for children's swimming programs, there is no standardization. So it's very important, I think, the 2 things here. One, to do this technology integration so you don't need manual connection each time, and you build it once, You sign an agreement about the use of that data, how you are going to process that data. So data security, commercial sensitivity is all secured throughout the whole process. But then once you get the data, you add the data standardization on top of that. So your processed data becomes something valuable. What we always say, our sector has always been a data-rich but information-poor sector, because there has been always a lot of data in physical activity sector, but turning this into intelligence and actionable insight is something we've been lacking of, and that's the value we are bringing to the table.
And it's critical too, because if organizations like EuropeActive are looking to influence public policy, or you're looking to get funding from the government, I mean, you've got this one data point here that the total social value of 2023 across your network was 8.5 billion euros.
Yes.
And that's significant. And you know, you've reached the social value per person is 185 euros, I'm approximating here, across the network. That is not insignificant. I think using data to really help show the value, because otherwise they have no other metric, right? It's just saying it's a feel-good story, and a feel-good story isn't going to help you get funding, help you get legislation that would be passed your way. How are ways do you think that, you know, other clubs can contribute more, right? So the more clubs you have, the better. You clearly give them value back by them providing data. Yeah. So if a club is listening, what are some incentives for them to start working with Full Global and providing you data?
So when they join the data project, European data project, we do everything for them through the data integration. First of all, free of charge. So all of that initial process of integration, getting the data is free of charge. And then in return, they get access to our European data dashboards, where they have two different dashboards available to them. One is the sector dashboard. So this up-to-date information from the sector is presented to them on a quarterly basis through an interactive dashboard, so they can see regularly, get access to the sector data. And second is their operator dashboard. Through standardization of their data, we provide them benchmarking against the rest of the sector. So in a very accurate and regular way, they can actually benchmark their own performance against the sector's performance as well. And all of that is provided them free of charge. And then if they want to engage more and get more interesting insights, they have the technology infrastructure already set, and they can explore different ways of doing data analytics with deeper data sets, whether it is social value, whether it is other benefits we can provide around the data set as well.
Well, I think one last question here before we wrap up, but I think given where you sit and the data that you collect, if anyone's going to have a crystal ball, it's going to be you. So given the next 5 years, looking into your crystal ball of Full Global, where do you think the European fitness industry is going? What are some big trends and changes that you see happening?
I think it's not a secret, because we are hearing this a lot now. I think I would say two things. How we use AI, both in the individual and also in the business level. Because in the individual level, it's about personalizing the experience. And now it's a fact that, and today we heard it from the earlier presentation as well, people don't do one type of activity. They do a range of things. They go to the gym, they run outside, they do something at home. And unless you customize your offer within this facility and outside for that audience, you are going to struggle to keep your customers long term. So at the individual level, it's using AI, machine learning, and all these algorithms to make the offer more customized for your customers. And I think on the business end, it's not just looking at your historical data to understand trends, but using data, also looking to the future and being able to understand what future is bringing to your business, whether it is predictive modeling, whether it is linking your data with the sector data sets, health data sets, and enhancing your data to make better future decisions for the direction of travel. I think those two things are the important trends on the individual and business side.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.